Good morning, all. It's 10 a.m. We'll just give it another minute or so just for more people to join. I see everybody is jumping on board. Hi, Christelle. Great to have you join. Just another few seconds. Right, I think I'd like to get started. For those who don't know me, my name is Keith Rosmarin. My role in BPESA is I lead the skills portfolio together with the broader team. And today's session is about a briefing for the Jobs Fund 11th call for proposals. Really fantastic to have everybody join the session. It looks like we're going to have a good number of people joining and to hear more about this great opportunity. This is one of two briefing sessions. One is today and the other one is going to be for tomorrow. You need not attend both sessions. So it's really just allow for individuals who aren't able to make today's session. So I think first of all, I'd like to just first of all make an apology to Reshni Singh, who is a much deserved leave and is unfortunately not able to join for today's session. But I am joined by a good team of individuals who will be able to support me with this briefing session. And first of all, I'd like to perhaps Neville, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and then Andy, over to yourself, and then we'll get into the agenda for the session.
Yeah, thank you, Keith, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to this call. So my responsibility in the team is looking after our special projects initiatives and the digital portfolio. But for this call, I'll be just focusing on the project office part of the equation. So Andy, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Neville. Good morning, everyone. Really good to connect again. My name is Andy Saul, and I'm the program lead on the Future Skills program, which is the BPESA initiative. I'll be working with Pete and Neville as this is an integrated solution, and we'll be jointly working to support you with the implementation of Jobs Fund 11. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Neville. I think just kicking off the procedures. I mean, despite the low growth economy, the sector continues to grow, adding more and more jobs to the economy in 2023 and attracting an increasing number of investors and businesses located in Europe and USA, especially to offshore their BP operations in South Africa. This year, South Africa was second to India for the Offshoring Destination of the Year award, thanks to the collaborative value proposition our sector puts forward to the international market. The demand side of the equation, of course, needs to be supported by the supply side. And BPESA has long recognized its role to help enable the sector to develop the skills required for in-demand jobs, in addition to developing the digital talent stack for the sector. Of course, the growth and skills development also catalyze employment for many youth with incredible potential and talent, a pathway into GBS jobs and exciting career prospects. And we recognize that digital transformation businesses require new skills, including those for omnichannel delivery, And recently, humans working with AI, ChatGPT is one of my good friends, to deliver even better services and customer experiences to our international client customers. The sector's master plan has one of the key supply side objectives to ensure that there's adequate financial support for sector growth, particularly skills funding. And BPESA is currently involved in driving a number of intermediated skills projects, and many more are on our radar, including the Jobs Fund 11th window of funding, which we'll hear more about today. But these funded skills projects are not only about upskilling, reskilling, and future skilling, they're also about achieving an outcome of learning and pathway to leading to a job and a career prospect. And all our funders are aligned around a pay-for-performance approach to skills funding. So today, what I'd like to do is start to show up a few slides, which we'll go through quite quickly, just around the context for the Jobs Fund application. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to presentation mode. Just want to check that everybody can see, and if you wouldn't mind just confirming that you can see the slides.
Yeah, all good. Thanks, Keith.
Perfect. Thanks very much. So the agenda for today, I think, first of all, is to introduce the program and what we're trying to achieve. We also want to just briefly talk through the Jobs Fund for those organizations, individuals who are not sure about who they are and what they do. We will go through very briefly the Jobs Fund delivery model. This particular request for proposals is something we're familiar with from a BPESA perspective. It's something we've done. Jobs Fund is an existing funder through the Innovation Fund. It's a rigorous process, and that's why we're starting. Although we only attended the briefing session last week, it's important that we get our all our ducks in a row. We would like to just, I think, spell out the value for the GBS sector, especially, and Andy will take us through initial concept design for the project, especially for tiers 1, 2, and 3. And then really, I think the main outcome for this session is really support that we need from yourselves, particularly to commit to demand over the next 2.5 years. It's 2.5 years because this project will launch early in 2024 and is over a 2-year period. So I think, first of all, BPESA is committed to submitting a proposal on behalf of our sector. We're focusing obviously on GBS, but also including digital and ITO demand and skills development to support the growth across the 3 tiers. Those tiers will be weighted on a basis of 75% in tier 1, 10% in tier 2, and 5% in tier 3. And we understand that I think that there is less demand and operations setting up in tiers 2 and 3, but it certainly is increasing. And the master plan and we are clear as a sector that we do need to branch out into those other tier 2 and tier 3 towns, I think especially. The focus for this project is to target around 1,000 people. And the budget that we will be aiming for is for 30 million rand. There is a requirement for matched funding, but it's done on the basis that BPESA as an NPO is able to do it on a ratio of 50% of that of matched funding, which means that we're requesting 20 million from the Jobs Fund, and 10 million rand is what will be allocated against matched funding that we have already got in place. The big issue for us, of course, is that the submissions must be done by the 17th of July. And we know that, in fact, we're not going to be finishing on the 17th of July. We'll definitely want to try and do it by the 16th. So the planning and engagement and some of this information that you're going to be supporting us with is going to be critical, and we'll give you a timeline around what we would like you to be able to do. But this session is about briefing on the opportunity and to guide you through on the criteria for participation. Very briefly, the Jobs Fund was established in 2011. They have a great term, they call it a challenge fund, utilizing public funds. But essentially the challenge fund means that only the best and more innovative funding requests are agreed to. And that's going to be important also for this funding window. It's not business as usual, accessing funding and doing what we've done for the last 5-10 years. It's also to bring in innovation and ways in which we can actually scale what we're actually trying to do. And Andy and I will actually give, and Neville will provide you with some more information around what that is. We've mentioned that the fund requires projects are co-financed, and we're fortunate to have had support from grant funders, particularly for BPESA Future Skills. And so that means that we're able to make that request for the 20 million from the Jobs Fund. The Jobs Fund have certainly developed a significant amount of experience in running these programs. We have developed a good collaborative relationship with the Jobs Fund. But one of the key areas that we've learned to work with is especially around making sure that we've got demand prospects for individuals to candidates to transfer into jobs, but more importantly, to be able to demonstrate the evidence that those outcomes have been achieved. I'd like to just hand over to Neville, who will just take you through relevance to the BPESA, and of course the GBS sector.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. So as Keith mentioned earlier, BPESA has had a lot of experience in managing projects like this. In fact, about 2 years ago, we started afresh on funded skills projects. We established a special projects team. We started developing our systems and our processes. I think for those of you that were involved in early projects, the reporting was quite onerous, and the process of uploading evidence was quite difficult to manage. We've consistently improved that over the 2 years, and currently we've automated much of the reporting as well as the evidence gathering, a much more improved process, and we will continue to drive these efficiencies so that the effort that it takes to participate, and in the case of the Job Fund, for those of you that are not aware, the requirements are quite significant, extremely onerous, and puts a large burden on the participants. And BPESA has worked very hard to make sure that we streamline and we get that process as seamless as possible. The other thing is that BPESA is in support and completely supports an outcomes funded model. We understand that the industry and the sector has demand, and it's demand that is growing. And we do not get involved in projects unless there is a very specific outcome, and that outcome ideally is translates into a job, a sustainable job, or it's an upskilling of an existing employee, and that upskilling is then to enhance and forward that individual's career. So the projects that we've been involved in up to now have been the APSA project. We've completed phase 1 and phase 2 of APSA. We're in the process of negotiating a phase 3 with APSA. And then on the Job Fund 7, we were partnered, or we are partnered with Harambee, and we've signed up in the process of, we've got 4 partners that work with us on that project, and we're in the process of signing up 2 more partners for us to complete on the Job Fund 7. On the UNDP GIZ, those funds have been operational in the Eastern Cape as well as in KZN, and those projects are a combination of upskilling as well as work readiness programs that we are implementing in those projects. So in a nutshell, we've been involved in this for 2 years. We are experienced, and we are improving our systems and processes, and we are making it a lot easier for our partners to participate in these programs. Thanks, Keith. Next slide. So there's no doubt that these projects are of value to the GBS sector. As Keith has mentioned, I mean, the sector is growing. South Africa's position in this GBS sector has improved and is recognized. And with that in mind, the challenge of then meeting demand remains. The challenge of addressing unemployment in the country remains a serious problem. And then also the ability for us to actually deliver into tier 2 and 3 GBS locations is becoming more important, and also of more value to the GBS sector. I think many of the operators understand that operating in tier 1 destinations or locations has its advantages, but it does get more challenging as time goes on, and it does get more expensive as far as resources, infrastructure, etc. is concerned. So moving to tier 2 and 3 locations has its benefits, and with these funding initiatives, we believe that we can promote and those initiatives and help grow those initiatives. Obviously, the Future Skills platform is a benefit, and the platform is being included in all the projects that we are now embarked on. And then, but to give you more detail on that, Keith, I'm going to hand back to you so you can just address the Future Skills platform and the add-ons that we are adding to that platform at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Neville. Yeah, we've had a very successful minimal viable product year of operations, with Future Skills platform kicking off on the 4th of May of 2022. We now have had well over 7,300 met our target of registered users on Future Skills platform, and currently in year 2 of operations, intending to get to 20,000, and there's scaling thereafter over the next 5 years. But more importantly, it's really about value and bringing that to the market. And in addition to existing content that we have on the platform, and Andy will be able to talk to that as the program director, but we've got some great innovative new areas, one of which, for example, Master It is a platform based on behavioral economics and built on the knowledge of Discovery Vitality program, as well as others, to help enhance learning behavior. And those are aspects that we're continuing to innovate and bring on board into Future Skills platform and help bring to market, one of many. But what I would like to do at this point And to Neville's point, Future Skills Platform will be a value add to these programs, and it's also an opportunity for us to differentiate our sector and deliver at the scale that we need to do for the Jobs Fund, and also to be able to track and report on some of those outcomes. What I would like to do is just ask for Andy now to come in and start talking around the concept that we've brought on board for this particular project. So Andy, you wouldn't mind coming on screen, and then I'll show up the first slide.
Perfect. Thanks, Keith, and thanks, Neville. So you've heard from Keith what a lot of the requirements are for. Keith, if you can just go back one slide just for a moment.
Sure.
You've heard what the requirements are from the Jobs Fund. And I want to recap some of those, because in coming up with a proposal for the Jobs Fund that's most likely to be successful, we've needed to combine these requirements in an integrated way into a solution that makes sense, and will meet those and will be implementable by yourselves. So just to recap what some of those key elements are to differentiate BPESA's proposal from what would be from others in a very, very competitive process for these funds in JF round 11. So the first is that it needs to be different to previous submissions by BPESA, and different typically to what the industry has submitted. Jobs funds specifically don't want more of the same. The next point then is, building on that, it needs to demonstrate some innovation around how we're tackling the barriers to skills development and job creation and youth employment. It needs to be additive in the sense that we're leveraging the Jobs Fund to do more than what would be possible without the Jobs Fund. It definitely needs to exploit synergies in the broader ecosystem. And so incorporating the National Pathway Manager Network, and specifically the SA Youth Platform, engaging with SETAs, working with financial services to bring in banking support and financial literacy training are key aspects of doing that. It also needs to strengthen the outputs as far as possible. And you've heard Keith talk about introducing the learner engagement incentive and rewards app called Master It, and also the e-portfolio management platform called P4P. And these are really designed to equip you, if you don't have the right tools in place, to get the best possible outcome through your process, which will be beneficial to you, obviously to BPESA, and of course to the funders. It cannot double dip. And so the elements that we will highlight to you, which need to be funding elements which would need to be topped up by yourselves, and or where funding would have to be accessed elsewhere than from the Jobs Fund and from Treasury. It must demonstrate its social impact, and specifically must target youth, women, and it must extend into the more excluded communities. So thinking of all of those elements, we've come together with two models. One model, as per the heading, is a design for location tiers 1 and 2, and we're going to start with that model. And then there's a small permutation on that when you look at tier 3 towns, and I'll explain that when I get to the tier 3 slide. So let's run through this from left to right, and I'll just highlight where these different elements are. I hope everybody can see it, and you'll get the slides if the detail is in very fine print. So starting off with our candidate, Nonku, who's categorized as youth and lives in a community close to a tier 1 or tier 2 center. So tier 1 are metros, tier 2 are the larger towns and cities. I think of Quebec, East London would be a category, a tier 2 city, Pietermaritzburg. Those would be examples of tier 2. She's not employed, so the person must be currently unemployed, and they should be sourced from the SA Youth Platform, which is why she would have a profile on that platform. That's a preference that we would urge everybody to do. But you may already have your own candidate pool, and should then motivate while you will source through that candidate pool. Once Nonku's on board, and is matched to the opportunity, which is participating with you as an employer and with your training provider partner, if you aren't providing the training yourself, then she would be enrolled onto the program. So there's a registration process, and she's going to, at the same time, be assisted to open a bank account, which would be by yourselves. But for those who want to take up the support, still to be confirmed, but Keith is engaging with BPESA's partners and ABSA, who've been working quite extensively in the development of the sector. So with that set up, NONCU will begin a work readiness program. And at the same time, where learnership is involved, would enroll for an unfunded learnership. So the unfunded learnership is primarily to deal with the double dipping. So it can't be a funded learnership because there is a contribution from jobs funds to the training cost and of course to the stipends. NONCU would also then be registered on the Future Skills platform at that point. And on the Future Skills platform are permutations of a digital work readiness program that you can use as you see fit. And those programs cover the behavioral competencies, that cover key elements of digital literacy and digital user skills. You would blend in what you feel is important in terms of key onboarding skills for your organization. And they also just deal with some of the core expectations around progressing through this particular program. So that program would be delivered and made available through the FSP, supported with the Master It app, which I'll explain in a moment. So at the bottom, you can see some of the subjects that are included in that digital literacy and digital work readiness program. Now we've put in there that should be 2 months, but depending on the background of the candidate of NONCU, you could motivate for that to be shorter, but there would not be funding for more than 2 months. So we'll talk to our anticipated breakdown of the costs in a moment, but just to keep that in mind. Then, having completed that training, which would be delivered by the employer or by the employer's training partner, and there are a number of training providers on this call today, then NONCU will seamlessly transition into the work environments where they would complete the balance of that qualification on the learnership in a work integrated learning model. So they're delivering services, they are being employed in a term-based agreement with yourselves for the duration of this work integrated learning. They're being paid market-related fees, and they're being supported throughout that period, again, with the use of the platform, and in particular, where there is a NCAF level qualification involved, with the e-portfolio tool from P4P, just to make sure that all the compliance aspects can be met through the digital platform. So that would require NONCU being in your work environment with your direct support and potentially continued support from the third-party training provider who you partner with. And that's combining the theory that they're being given in a program that you would curate on the platform with support from the FSP team. And of course, they would be in a live working environment where you would provide the team leadership and the coaching and mentoring support. In addition to them completing the qualification and going through the business specific training that you require for them, the role specific training, they would also be able to explore and enrich their own learning and skill set by using whatever content is of their preference on the platform, or as you would like to guide them in terms of additional elective learning. And we've been building up the content on that platform to make it as relevant as possible to really help organizations upskill their workforce to transition into this digital economy as fast as possible. So there's a lot of new good content on there that we feel would be very beneficial for them as electives, in addition to the core training that they're doing. And of course, that would be building up their skills passport. So at the end of that training, NONCU would then be able to update her profile on the SA Youth platform if she had one to start with, If she was sourced through your platform, we would ask that you create a profile with her on the sayouth.mobi platform, and she updates that to reflect the training and the work experience that she's had. Hopefully at that point, when Nonku completes the program, she, together with her cohort colleagues, would be absorbed into full-time employment with yourselves. If for whatever reason she is not amongst that 80% being absorbed, we would hope that she could start up her own work, she could continue studying, she could look for another job within the sector where there is demand, or she could look for jobs in other sectors of the economy with her now updated profile being that much more employable. So there are various options for Nonku, and that's what we want to demonstrate to the funders, is that her employability would be significantly enhanced with this learning, the work experience, and if she's not going to be directly employed by you as part of that 80%, then she's got a high probability of self-placing later. So throughout this 12-month period, at the bottom right-hand block, you'll see she can build her digital skills competencies as well as her behavioral competencies, and of course would have gone through your own business-specific training. She'd use the platform. That content is aligned to the Digital Skills Framework 1, and that's another element that BPESA wants to demonstrate to the funders, that BPESA is leading in aligning to national qualification standards and competency standards. And the Digital Skills Framework 1 is the new framework that the national government departments are now all converging to and aligning around. And it covers digital literacy, digital user skills, digital leadership, sector-specific digital skills, and RCT skills. And in the sector-specific digital skills are where the GBS applications fit in. So a very helpful framework, and will also ideally allow greater recognition of the training that you do by the QCTO and also by DTRC. And you would have seen through your participation in different proposals and research surveys that we've been conducting, that we've been lobbying for changes in the policy environment to give greater recognition for this type of training intervention to you as the employer, and also lobbying for changes in the CETA grant regulations so that post this training, there's greater access to funding that's funded by your skills levy through the CETAs in the discretionary grant and sector grant pots. So her POE would also be kept up to date through the e-portfolio solution with P4P, unless you have your own solution. And she would be incentivized and rewarded with the Master It app. And we did a proof of concept using this Master It app in the Eastern Cape with quite fantastic results. The challenge has always been trying to get young people to upskill themselves on their own when they're not in the classroom supported by a facilitator. And while there'll be situations where they simply need to be in the classroom or the working environment for the practical application of those skills, there are cases where they can do a lot on their own, but they need that motivation and incentive. And so this program, which is developed by the same people who developed the Discovery Health incentive app, the Vitality app, really does encourage young people to complete their courses, push them up on their leaderboards, and they get redeemable tokens, which can be converted into tangible consumables and other services through a partner network that Master It have. So we saw fantastic impact on user engagement and outcomes, which has given us the confidence that this is definitely something to incorporate into the platform to support the self-directed learning component of the program. Not only that, it also supports the facilitated component. So that's the model for the tier 1 and the tier 2 areas. And just to go back to those numbers, I think we might have made an error in the first page, but the numbers there are essentially 80% would go into, 85% would go into the tier 1 areas. That's where the most growth is. 10% into the tier 2 areas and 5% into tier 3. So tier 3 then, the second model, is very similar, except that we engage new partners in this model to extend the reach into the tier 3 areas, which, as you'll recall from the sector master plan, is a core component of the strategy to unlock access to the talent pool in these areas so that the sector can scale to achieve the very high goals that it has. So the process is the same, but you'll see in the work readiness component there, suddenly we introduced the Digital Skills Hub by Amandla. So I just want to quickly introduce who they are for those of you who've not met the Amandla team. Fantastic organization. They partner with the Development Bank of South Africa, and they run what they call safe labs across the country. They currently have operational safe labs in Jabulani, Soweto, and Alexandra, in Louwsburg, and one in Bela. They're developing new labs at the moment in Zwide, Tembulutu, Marikana, and Samile. And then they have smaller safe hubs with smaller infrastructure than these do that are going up in Tembisa, Diepsloot, Khayelitsha, Gugulethu, Knysna, and then the KwaMashu one is still in development. So we'll share the details of that as we progress, but the engagement BPESA has had with the Development Bank and with Amandla is that within these safe hubs is a digital lab. And that digital lab has got internet connectivity with the right connection speed. It's got power supply. It's got devices. It's a secure environment for people to go to. And one of the big challenges in the proofs of concepts that BPESA has been running in the more rural areas, and we use the Eastern Cape with the UNDP support and the FSP platform to test these out, is that it's extremely difficult for young people to work from home if they don't have the connectivity or the devices, and of course they're incurring the data costs. So when they move into these centers where they can undergo the training, those barriers get taken away. And the idea there, and that's why the number is quite low, is hopefully there'll be organizations amongst yourselves that will see the value and the opportunity of either locating in these areas, and there are a number of you on this call who have, certainly I know merchants on the call and they've located in Jabulani, and then you also have organizations like Sigma and Shadow who've located in Mitchell's Plain, not in a D lab, but in close proximity. So the idea is that you would use this as a catalyst to think about your tier 3 strategy, to think about how you can get in there and either set up a small delivery center or access the talent pool in those communities virtually, like many organizations in BPESA are doing, is starting to run hybrid models where they can reach young people from these areas. And so young people in these communities who are already on the database of the D labs would go through a filtering process. They'd be on the SA Youth platform, they'd be matched to the role, they'd go through the training in the D labs, which you could co-facilitate to help build capacity in these D labs. And then they would fit into the model exactly as we have it, where they would work under your employ, completing the work integrated learning, and ideally be absorbed. But absorption in this instance might mean working from home. It need not necessarily mean working from an office. So we've introduced that because that will start to help the broader ecosystem understand what models are more workable when you're trying to unlock this talent pool in these areas. So that's the differentiator in tier 3. So lastly, what I'd like to do, those are the two models, and I'm sure there are lots of questions, is I just want to give you a high level possible breakdown, and Keith, Neville, Sam and I still need to do quite a lot of work around the BPESA proposal to the Jobs Fund, because they've also got caps on different components of the funding. And our current thinking at the moment is, as you heard from Keith, the funding application from BPESA to the Jobs Fund would be for 20 million, with BPESA raising an additional 10 million in a 1 to 0.5 ratio through the partners we already have in the FSP and new partners for whom BPESA is engaging at the moment, and there are a number of them. And we're confident that we'll be able to secure that match funding in time. So that makes it a total of 30 million. The 30 million at 1,000 people would you can do the maths, would give you 30,000 Rand per person. Now, of that 30,000, there's a certain cost, about 8% that would go into project management, about 7% would go into oversight, monitoring and evaluation, reporting and compliance, which is really onerous with the Jobs Fund. Then for the Future Skills platform, including the P4P&E portfolio component and the unlimited use for that full period by the users, that would be approximately 3,000 Rand for all of that. And that would leave 22,500 Rand. So that 22,500 Rand should ideally be split into a stipend portion of approximately 9,000 Rand. So that would be 4,500 per month over the 8-week or 2-month work readiness component. That's where the stipend is intended for, and 13,500 Rand towards training costs. And then assuming they would move into your environment as an employer where they would be paid by you, topped up on that stipend, at least at minimum wage for that first year, ideally with the top up, and you would incur further training costs as part of BAU. So that's the thinking at the moment. We've arrived at the solution to put our best foot forward from a competitive position to the Jobs Fund, because we appreciate that this time round it's not going to be that easy to get a large allocation, even with the track record that the GBS sector and BPESA has. So I'll hand back then to Keith and Neville just to talk through the contracting and funding model.
Let me just come off. There we go. Yeah, thanks, Neville. If you wouldn't mind just going through this briefly, and then we'll segue into really what we're requiring from the GBS sector to support in terms of those commitments. Thanks, Neville.
So very simple model. On the left-hand side of the screen is represented by the Jobs Fund itself. And just to the right of that is the contractual agreement that will exist between BPESA and the Jobs Fund, with BPESA playing the role of the ecosystem facilitator. And that facilitation will be the implementation of subcontractor agreements. Now, I can say that contractual agreements between BPESA and partners has been quite strenuous in the past. I think many of you have been exposed to that complex contracting process. We are looking to streamline that and to implement a master services process where our partners will become accredited and will sign into that master services agreement, and it'll allow us to be a lot more flexible as we then contract those partners for not just this fund, but also other funding opportunities as well. So yet another way that we're looking to streamline and make it more easier for us to get through the process. But so the idea here is that we will either contract directly with an employer, and the employer will be responsible for the end-to-end delivery of the program. We will also welcome the consortium that are able to come together and in the form of a trainer/employer. We've done that in the past and it's worked extremely well. And I think, you know, just for some of the operators accessing training organizations that are professional and focused in, you know, developing those skills has worked extremely well, and we've got a lot of case studies that can prove that. So very simple contracting process. BPESA will contract with the Jobs Fund. BPESA will then subcontract to single employers or consortium consisting of trainers and employers, and there will be management of the data, the evidence and the information will flow from the subcontracted partner through to BPESA. BPESA will then be responsible for making sure that that evidence is successfully submitted through to the Jobs Fund. I can just mention the details are still not that clear, but the Jobs Fund will be prepaying into a separate bank account, a joint bank account, where the funds will be paid into those bank accounts. So the intention is to pay early and pay on milestones, and not to subject the subcontracted partners to lengthy wait times for payments to take place. And so that's it. I'm not sure there's anything else I need to cover, Keith, but maybe the last slide, if Keith, you want me to deal with this?
Yes, I think do that, and I think we'll all, Andy and I will support. Neville, thanks.
Okay. All right. So for those operators that are willing to participate, I think what we need is we will be making available a Word document, a letter of intent, and this will allow you to then use that Word document to add to it. What we need is your commitment to be partnered with BPESA, as well as your commitment to demand over the next 2.5 years, that is. So basically for the fiscal year of 2024 and 2025, and what that anticipated demand is. We also require that you indicate to us, but as far as that demand is concerned, the location of that demand. So in which geographic location that demand is expected to be. And then there's also a requirement around race, gender, and I think that's it. But, you know, and understanding that the program is weighted towards females. And then obviously we know all about the race, you know, the Black, preference for Black to be included. There's also a letter of intent well, Andy, I think you need to explain to me what is the difference between a letter of intent and expression of interest. But let me just finish and then you can come in. For those training providers that are wanting to partner and that have formally set up those partnerships or are able to set up those partnerships, the preference is that you submit a joint expression of interest together with your partners. If in the case where training providers have no employees at this stage to partner with, we understand that some of the training providers have recognized employers that they work with on a regular basis. It might be difficult for you to get that commitment at this stage, in which case you will then also submit a letter of intent with that in mind. And then the contact details is emails to be sent through to info@bpesa.org.za, and we'll need your letters, signed letters, before 5 p.m. on the 23rd of June. So, Andy, if you can just come in and just provide a little bit more insight, specifically where there might not be commitment at this stage, understanding that we're talking about 2024 and 2025. You know, some of the training providers specifically might not yet have those partnerships in place.
Sure, Neville. So I think first of all, the letter of intent, that's to be completed by the employers on the demand side. and it's quite comprehensive, as you'll see when you receive the letter after this call. So the assumption will be made that employers can provide their own training and that they would have lined up training partners if they need that in their letter of intent. For training providers who are not connected to a demand partner at the moment and want to put their hands up to participate, they can put in an expression of interest, and that can just be by email to the special projects team with a motivation as to why they should be participating, the value that they can add. And then what BPESA will endeavor to do is to flag to employers who haven't got training partners or are keen to take on new training partners who those are who've expressed interest, but without committing to match them up. So BPESA won't be matching demand partners and supply partners, but can help facilitate those introductions using the companies that submit expressions of interest as training providers and the employers submitting letters of intent where they're interested. So that's really the distinction between the two. Yeah, if there are questions about that, happy to answer.
Okay, thanks, Andy, for explaining that. Now, I also understand it. So thank you for that. Keith, I'm going to hand back to you because I think this is the last slide. And so, Keith, I'm going to hand back to you, and maybe there's some questions that we can answer.
Sure. And thanks, Neville. Thanks, Andy. I think one important aspect, I think, to remember as well, that Andy mentioned that we're looking at around 1,000 individuals for this particular project, but we look to these opportunities to identify demand opportunities and commitments over the next 2 years is incredibly valuable to us. This is not the only channel of funding that we're looking to and prospecting for to assist with skills development. There are a number of others. So I think it's incumbent on you also to please look at your demand forecast in those tier 1, 2, and 3 over the next 2.5 years. And that'll help us also to provide an evidence-based approach to our funders that our sector is indeed growing. We are able to create new net jobs, and that is really important to our funders. So really appreciate, I think, that input. We will send those letters of intent templates out to you today, and would appreciate, I think, not just even waiting for the deadline for next Friday. If you are able to get it in sooner, fantastic. We'd really appreciate that. But would like to give the floor an opportunity for any questions that you might have, as well as in the chat. And Andy, Neville, appreciate your support in helping to answer some of those questions. And please reach out to myself or Neville on any other questions you might have post this this session, that we can field some of those again. I see Shannon has asked, and perhaps if you don't mind, Andy, to please outline the costing model again, is one of the questions. So minimum stipend, and yes, the minimum stipends as well. So perhaps just some information around the costing, Andy. I think you've already answered at least some of it, but if you could just outline the costing model again.
Yes, of course, Keith. And again, we can just put that into writing. So this is the guideline costing model. I just want to reiterate that. And there may be some minor changes as we work through the budget and for the proposal. So the planned budget is 30,000 that we will ask for funding. Well, that will be the total cost. Remember, that's funded by our application to the Jobs Fund and match funding. 30,000 per person. Of that 30,000, 2,400 will be allocated to BPESA for project management, and 2,100 for monitoring and evaluation, compliance and reporting. So those are the requirements of the Jobs Fund anyway that needs to be met. Then for the Future Skills platform, 3,000 Rand, which is 1,500 for the platform costs and 1,500 for Master It and the Passion for Performance e-portfolio management would be deducted. So that would leave 22,500 Rand. 22,500 Rand needs to be split between stipends and training costs, contribution to training costs. So at a minimum of 4,500 Rand per month for stipend, which is slightly above minimum wage, over a 2-month period, that would be 9,000 Rand in stipends. That would leave 13,500 Rand for training, for contribution to training costs in that work readiness phase. The expectation is that once these young people move into the employment environment for work integrated learning, they would have been there in any event, and that business will be covering those costs of training, including the top-up costs, to get them into any higher salary to fit in with your own pay structures. So I hope that covers it. And we'll put an FAQ together as well and just share that with you, which would include these breakdowns.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Andy. Just having a look at the chat to see if there are any other questions. Excellent. I don't see any others, but if others do come to mind, as I mentioned, please reach out to either Neville or myself for those questions. We'll field those and obviously share those with everybody who are participating in these sessions. If you do know of individuals or organizations who have not attended the session and don't know about this opportunity, please let them know that we have got a briefing session once again tomorrow. And that'll duplicate this session. So if something's not clear to you, you want to go through it again, please, you're welcome to join again for tomorrow.
Sorry, just a quick jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I see Parusha from TRKZN has just noted an interest to look at how TRKZN could add value. Just to flag that to you and Neville to follow up on.
Great. Thank you very much, Andy. Thanks for recognizing that. That's good. And then Clinton, yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I'd just like to emphasize the importance of the letter of intent. I think it is extremely important that we get these commitments because it's in support of our bid to the Jobs Fund that we can demonstrate demand. So for the employers that are out there that can commit to that demand and indicate that that is the demand that they are aware of, that letter is going to be extremely important for us to have. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, thanks, Neville. And then Andy, just finally in the last few minutes, as Noel has asked the question whether those organizations applying would need to be CETA accredited for the training component. I know you talked about a preference, but not necessarily only that. So please, if you wouldn't mind providing your input there too.
Thanks for the question, Noel. So the learnership with a CETA endorsed qualification is preferable, and it's again just talking to bringing the ecosystem components together to strengthen the outcome and also to enrich the solution. But that's preferable, not compulsory. What we'd strongly recommend is that if you are not an accredited provider with a CETA, that you look at partnering for that. But again, you may choose not to. Also just want to distinguish the work readiness component from the work integrated learning and the accredited qualification. Ideally, if you, from your training department in the preparation phase, can go through the content that we have, or if you have your own content, you could incorporate the work readiness component into the overall qualification. That would be the best solution. But at the base level, it would be work integrated learning, work readiness training, and then they would go through the workplace training as a separate qualification. The preference is that that's seamless and forms part of one training program, one learning program. And the ideal state is that is an accredited qualification with your CETA, whoever you're paying your levies to, or a partner CETA.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. I see we have, we're on the hour. Really appreciate, I think, everybody joining for today. Looking forward to seeing the letters of intent coming through, and so that we can actually demonstrate what this sector is able to do to help create an inclusive economy. So much appreciated. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a wonderful day further.